It's often said that we should never meet our heroes because they might disappoint us. Not because we discover they're human, but because they may not always inspire us to become better humans. But to every adage, there's always an exception. And anyone who's had the privilege of meeting Nadine Strossen and the even greater honor of becoming her friend knows that she is the rarest of breeds. She's a hero who lives up to expectations and never fails to inspire us. Nadine and I graduated from Harvard Law School a decade and a half apart, and I admired her from afar my entire career. Our paths would not cross until many years later when I began to focus less on my career as a lawyer and more on an even greater purpose that we both share: advocating for viewpoint diversity that is integral to ACTA's vitally important mission to support excellence in liberal arts education. I finally had the good fortune of meeting Nadine when we participated on a panel at Freedom Fest, a libertarian conference. We were discussing a topic on which she is quite possibly more well-versed than any other human being on the planet. Nadine made the compelling case, as she always does, for the hate speech that sensible people abhor. She explained in her inimitable way that ideas that challenge our worldview or offend or even frighten us are nonetheless entitled to legal protection because they play an essential role in our quest for truth. That the freedom to express ourselves is not a privilege gifted to those who hold popular beliefs or opinions, but that's a right guaranteed to everyone in a free society. Yet as I listened to Nadine speak, I was also struck by something else. Despite her vast knowledge of case law and the intricacies of the First Amendment, she didn't bore our audience by tediously parsing out the limits of protected speech. Who wants that? That's what legal scholars often do, but she spoke passionately from a place that academicians seldom venture. She spoke to what matters most to all of us as human beings. Nadine explained with this profound grace and empathy that I could not even begin to comprehend, that without the courage to defend the voices of people we loathe, we cannot possibly protect the freedoms that we ourselves cherish. She reminded us that free speech doesn't play favorites. It can be claimed by racists marching in solidarity with Nazis, but it's also been the first and only line of defense for those facing discrimination and disenfranchisement. Without this precious right, we could not confront the shameless legacies of our past and learn from them. Without it, I wouldn't be able to stand before you all now, the beneficiary of a civil rights movement that enabled me to receive an education in liberal arts at two of the country's finest universities. And listening to her, that's when I realized what makes Nadine so different from any other hero I've ever met. She is relentlessly authentic in her pursuit of her mission. She embraces the principles of free speech with every fiber of her being, not just because she's an expert on the subject, which she is undoubtedly, but because she believes these principles have an almost divine power to uplift, inspire, and advance humanity. So, I left the panel that day, grateful for the opportunity to share the stage with a woman I'd admired from afar for so long. But little did I know that I'd soon be calling on my hero for help. 1 year ago, I was appointed executive director of the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, or FAIR, as we call it. It's a nonprofit organization committed to the mission that Nadine dedicated herself to while serving as president of the ACLU for 17 years. For those who aren't familiar with FAIR, we defend the rights of anyone who is denied the right to free speech or equal protection, regardless of their race, ancestry, or other characteristics. I also had the dubious distinction of assuming charge of this organization on October 9th of last year, 2 days following the brutal massacre in Israel. And we in FAIR were under tremendous pressure to issue a statement on those atrocities and speak to the alarming increase in anti-Semitism on college and university campuses. As executive director, I was also tasked with identifying like-minded thought leaders to join our board of advisors at this critical time. Not surprisingly, one name immediately came to mind. I extended an invitation to Nadine, fully expecting that she might demur. Despite her insane speaking schedule, and you all know what I'm talking about, the woman is constantly crisscrossing the country. And despite having a husband who I'm quite sure must require at least some attention, she agreed to serve, not as a favor to me, but because she understood what's at stake now for all of us. In an era consumed with fear, anger, and vitriol, Nadine's voice holds exceptional power. The daughter of a Holocaust survivor who passionately defends the rights of people who would wish her harm and even reject her very existence. A woman who contends that the best way to resist hate and to promote equality isn't through censorship, but through vigorous counter-speech and activism. Imagine for a moment the extraordinary confidence this requires, not only in the power of free speech, but also in the enduring moral compass of humans who are afforded this right. Nadine believes in all of us and what we are all capable of. She's outlived the need to impress us with her skills and talents. I mean, she could choose to remain relevant by phoning it in, right? Occasionally publishing a book or providing expert sound bites on cable TV. We've all seen people do that. But she's chosen a far more rigorous path, tirelessly advocating for the intellectual freedom that has sustained higher education and has kept the world from retreating into darkness for the past several hundred years. I've often called upon Nadine, sometimes at the last minute, to speak at fundraisers and even informal events like webinars on censorship in the medical establishment. And incredibly, she has never once declined my request. She has always found a way to make herself available, even if it required rearranging her schedule, taking an earlier flight, or making a mad dash to a train station. Her energy and her enthusiasm never cease to astound me. She's driven neither by ego or money, but by the singular mission that fuels the work of organizations like ACTA and FAIR, because she understands how critical this work is to all of us now. It is said that those who sleep in a democracy may wake in a dictatorship. I have no fear that America will succumb to dictatorship, but I do worry that we find ourselves at risk of a more insidious danger: the voluntary surrender of our right to think and speak freely. Today, we stand at a crossroads as a country and as a civilization. We, who defend liberal values, have tremendous work ahead of us. We've seen great damage to institutions we hold dear. Academic neutrality and viewpoint diversity are under unprecedented assault. And complacency is rife among a generation that has never experienced the possibility of losing what they have for so long taken for granted. We know that what has transpired over decades will likely take just as long to undo. But with the unrelenting efforts and the indomitable spirit of heroes like Nadine Strossen, there is no doubt in my mind that we will all succeed in this mission. So, thank you, Nadine, for all that you do, for all that you've given, and for being one of humanity's greatest living treasures.